the 2015 feature film directed by Ryan Coogler, starring Michael B. Jordan and Sylvester Stallone. Yes, the continuing story of the Rocky saga and a spin-off movie of sorts. This movie was fantastic and also would go on to give Sylvester Stallone a win at the Golden Globes for Best Supporting Actor for the 2015 Golden Globes. Let's get right into it. First off, I'm going to have to discuss some spoilers in this review. So if you have not seen Creed or you intend on seeing Creed, you may want to stop watching this now and go on to see the movie. The reason I'm going to discuss spoilers is I really want to get into the characters in the movie and really dissect it and talk about the important aspects of this film. So first off, as I mentioned, Creed is a spin-off of the Rocky saga. So let's get into Rocky. As we know, Rocky Balboa was the underdog fighter from the mean streets of Philadelphia who rose above the challenge, fell in love with his love of his life, Adrian, and the character was created by Sylvester Stallone and starred Sylvester Stallone as the iconic role. Rocky, the saga would go on, span 3 decades, approximately 30 years, starting in 1976 with Rocky, and then ending the perfect bookend to the series with a 6th film in the Rocky series called Rocky Balboa in 2006. Now, when we saw Rocky Balboa, we realized that his beloved wife, Adrian, had passed away from cancer in 2002, and he was running a very successful restaurant called Adrian's in Philadelphia, and his son, Robert, was now an adult. So that's kind of where we left Rocky Balboa. This was Sylvester Stallone's final movie as Rocky. He was very happy with the end product, as were the fans. I thought this was perfect to end Rocky. So let's get into 2015 now. So we have a potential spin-off of Rocky called Creed coming out. Now let's get into the director Ryan Coogler, because his background and his story is actually just as inspiring as Stallone's actually. So Ryan Coogler is a young director who's made a couple films, one of them being Fruitvale Station, fantastic film starring Michael B. Jordan, and it tells the story of a tragedy, the last 24 hours of a young African-American male before he comes into contact with police, and there's some tragic consequences in this movie. Very riveting film, highly recommend it, and starring Michael B. Jordan in the title role. So, Ryan Coogler is a huge Rocky fan, and I also am a huge Rocky fan. So this is really cool, his background here. So as a youth, he would play football, and his father, a diehard Rocky fan, would often play Rocky 2 before he would go to his football matches to get him pumped and amped for the football games. Now, his mother, unfortunately, had terminal cancer, and during that time, they would watch Rocky together. So Rocky has a lot of meaning for Ryan Coogler. He also saw his father as a real-life Rocky, so his father's his inspiration. And when his father became ill, he came up with the idea for this movie continuing the character Rocky Balboa, and having the unknown son of Apollo Creed, Adonis Creed, come into the woodwork here. So he had to sell this idea to Stallone, and Stallone had always written these stories for all the Rocky movies. So this was original in the fact that Ryan Coogler was writing this one. And when he approached Sylvester Stallone and explained the story and explained the reason why Rocky would come back into the cinema, Sylvester Stallone was sold on it. He was right into it. And thank goodness for that, because when we thought Rocky ended in 2006, we had no idea he'd come back in 2015. But in a supporting role. This isn't his movie. He is the second name on the marquee, and rightfully so. He's a supporting actor. This story is an origin tale of young Adonis Creed, and this time Rocky is the mentor and the trainer. He's not the boxer. So this is pretty cool. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Creed. So basically, Adonis Johnson is his name. Was the illegitimate son of Apollo Creed. Apollo Creed had an affair on his wife, Marianne Creed, and as a result, the woman he had the affair with became pregnant. He then went to the Ivan Drago fight in 1985, and you see in Rocky IV, and unfortunately Apollo Creed was tragically killed in that fight by Ivan Drago. So Adonis Johnson was born unbeknownst to Marianne Creed. So for 13 years of his life, he was going in and out of group homes, foster homes. His biological mother passed away, and he wound up in a youth correctional facility in California. And that's where we start the movie in 1998. He's 13 years old. He's getting into fights in the youth center. And Marianne Creed has now discovered that he exists. And Marianne Creed comes to center and has a really good talk with him, and essentially says, why don't you come live with me? So the movie fast forwards into 2015. We now see Michael B. Jordan as Adonis Johnson, and he's going to amateur bar fights in Mexico, fighting for money. But he comes from a good background now. He had a tough childhood for the first 13 years, but Marianne Creed is still wealthy. So he's actually got a pretty good job in Los Angeles, working for a big firm. But his passion is boxing. And there's a really cool scene in this movie where he'll look at old YouTube videos of his father, Apollo Creed, fighting Rocky Balboa from that actual 1979 Rocky II match. And he'll shadow box as he watches it. So I thought that was pretty cool. The neat thing with this movie, too, is all of the boxers in this movie are real boxers. Other than Michael B. Jordan, who's obviously taken up the skill to learn to fight in this movie. So we're introduced to an interesting cast. We get to see the Delphi Boxing Academy, and this is super cool because this is the home of Apollo Creed. So you've got Apollo Creed's silhouette, his pictures in there. It's really cool. And the gym is run by Tony Little Duke. Now, this is cool because you may recall Duke from the Rocky movies, the late actor Tony Burton, fantastic guy. He was Apollo Creed's original trainer, went on to help Rocky Balboa in Rocky III, Rocky IV, and then in the last film, Rocky Balboa. He has now passed away, but his son now runs the gym. So there's a bit of a connection between him and Adonis Johnson. Adonis Johnson is trying to convince him, will you train me? And he basically says, nobody's training. I'm going to make sure of that. These guys come here, they fight for life. So Adonis Johnson's really struggling with this. At the same time, he ends up challenging one of the main contenders, Danny Stuntman Wheeler, portrayed by real-life boxer Andre Ward, to a fight for his Mustang. And of course, him thinking he's going to come out ahead, Danny wins the fight, wins his Mustang. So at this point, he's really confused what to do. So this takes us to Philadelphia. He decides he's going to search out the iconic Rocky Balboa in Philadelphia and ask him to train him. This is where it gets cool. So he goes to Philadelphia, get to see the Rocky statue. We see Adrian's restaurant that was first introduced in Rocky Balboa. And we see what Rocky Balboa looks like in 2015 at the age of 69. Boxing is way in his past. He's not involved in any shape or form. And we get to see what Rocky is like as a senior citizen. And it's pretty cool. They get to meet for the first time. It's one of the best scenes in the movie that I like. There's so many good scenes in this movie, but that one's great. And he basically wants him to train him. Rocky clearly says, look, I don't do this anymore. I don't go to mixed gym anymore, blah, blah, blah. And essentially, Adonis lets out a secret that only he would know and only Apollo Creed would know, in the fact that there was a secret fight in Rocky III and who won that fight. Now, Rocky's amazed at how this kid would know this, to which he basically says, look, I'm Apollo Creed's son. And it takes some convincing for Rocky to believe that. And the acting here is just top notch. It's really good. You see an older, more vulnerable Stallone here as Rocky, who's left boxing in the past. We also soon, unfortunately, learn that Rocky has lost some more important people in his life. His best friend, Paulie, has passed away now of cancer as well. As a matter of fact, his tombstone is right next to Adrian's in the cemetery. We also learn that Robert Balboa, his adult son, has moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where I'm from, so I think that's cool. To get out of the spotlight of Rocky, essentially, to start his own life with his girlfriend. So Rocky is truly on his own here, and we see an older Rocky, but we also see a very wise, Jedi, Mr. Miyagi Rocky, where he's made all these mistakes over the last 40 years, and he essentially is a teacher now. He's able to help this young character, Adonis, not make the same mistakes he does. So after a while, Rocky decides, you know what, I'm going to help him out, and it's cool to go back in a Mighty Mix gym. It's totally redone. It's now run by one of Rocky's childhood friends, Pete Sparino, portrayed by Richie Coster, and his son is Leo the Lion, portrayed by real-life boxer Gabriel Rosado. And you can see Rocky's really struggling with getting back into boxing, helping with boxing, that is, because his friend Pete's asked him to do this to help train his son, which Rocky declined. Didn't want to get back in the spotlight, of course. So they make a pact, Rocky and Adonis, that they are going to work together, and the training is just phenomenal in this movie. Now let's get into the love interest here, Bianca. So Bianca is portrayed by Tessa Thompson. She is a young up-and-coming singer, but she's also got something she's fighting as well. She has a hearing loss that's coming on. She's deaf, and it's getting worse by the day. So Bianca and Adonis meet because they both have apartments in the same building, and they end up falling in love. So there's a really touching love story here, and it's really heartfelt. It's not rushed by any means there. at all. Let's get into Marianne Creed. So Marianne Creed's portrayed by Felicia Rashad, who you'll know from the Cosby Show days, and she portrays Marianne Creed, Adonis's adopted mother. So they have a pretty good relationship here too. You see that. But one thing I should mention about this too is the character development comes first and foremost before any of the fight scenes, and I'm going to get into more of that. So as Adonis Johnson, is getting into fighting, somebody is able to leak that he's actually Apollo Creed's son, which brings everybody out of the woodwork. Everybody wants to fight him now, and a manager for the current champion, Tommy Holiday, portrayed by great Scottish actor Graham McTavish, approaches Rocky and Adonis with a challenge that his fighter wants to, Pretty Ricky Conlon, wants to fight Adonis Johnson, as long as he uses the name Adonis Creed, which Adonis is struggling with because he wants to use his biological mother's maiden name. Now, let's get into Pretty Ricky Conlon. He's portrayed again by another real-life boxer, Tony Bellew, who's fantastic. He's a fantastic boxer and an amazing actor, considering this is his first time acting. This is phenomenal. He comes off as a true, kind of a bad guy. A throwback to the old Rocky movies. He's a fighter that's about to go to jail, prison for something he's done in his personal life. So he's got one more fight to do, and he's going to give it to Adonis Johnson / Adonis Creed. So as we're training for that, or I should say before I get into that, Rocky's very leery about him accepting the challenge. And basically, again, the wise old Rocky is able to see this and points out to the manager, Tommy Holiday, in front of Adonis, the reason he wants to fight you is he thinks it's a sure win for him. And Tommy Holiday says, no, it's not. And Rocky says, yeah, it is. So you see a wiser version of Rocky, truly looking out for Adonis's best interests here. So again, the movie is truly about Adonis Creed, but we also see something that Rocky Balboa has to deal with. And I am going to say right now, this is one of the best performances of Stallone's career in this particular movie. So Rocky has to battle somebody larger than life than a fighter, a villain, etc. And I'm going to get into some spoilers here. As we see the movie, Rocky is suffering from different medical issues throughout the movies. And there's a training sequence where he becomes quite ill and starts vomiting in the ring. He's rushed to the hospital. They conduct some tests. Now, Rocky's a very proud character. So Rocky's called back down to the doctor's office, and this is when the doctor basically tells him, you have cancer. But if we treat it now, you've got a very high success rate of getting out of the neck of the woods. And it's a very emotional scene where you basically see Rocky say, look, my wife tried chemotherapy. It didn't work for her. I don't want to do it. You know what? I'm okay with this. And it's a very emotional, gripping scene that really gripped me when I saw this movie in the theaters. And this is also a tribute to Ryan Coogler's mother and father, this scene. This is the inspiration, watching his mother with cancer, watching his father sick. He took this and put this into this character. And Stallone did his research to a T on this for sure. The aspects of cancer and stuff. So Rocky decides he's going to keep it to himself, and eventually Adonis finds out about this, and Adonis challenges him, says, look, I got to take you to the hospital. And this is the most emotional, pivotal scene in the entire Rocky series by far, where Rocky says, I'm not doing chemotherapy. Everybody in my life has moved on, and I'm still here. If I could put everything good in a bowl and trade it in for one night with my wife, I'd die a happy man right now. And he basically says, I'm not fixing. If I get broken, I agreed I'm not going to fix that. So they have a huge verbal altercation because Adonis cares about Rocky getting help. Rocky doesn't want to get help. Long story short, eventually they come to an agreement that if he doesn't get the treatment, Adonis will stop training. So it's a really cool scene, pivotal scene where they do a fist bump and basically say, if I fight, you fight. And that's a key line in this movie. So the training montage is different from anything you've ever seen. You're seeing Adonis Creed training very intensely. You're seeing the character Pretty Ricky Conlon training, but you're also seeing something completely original. You're seeing Rocky Balboa going through chemotherapy treatment during the actual training montage. And this is real Rocky. This is Stallone's put all his vanity on the table. He's let himself go for these scenes. He's lost his hair. He looks like you would if you're going through chemotherapy, and it's very realistic. He's basically staggering to the washroom. He's trying to get there to vomit in time. He's having a hard time drinking shakes. But at the same time, he's in Adonis' corner when he can be. And Adonis is in his corner. So you see this real important connection here in this movie. And very, very, like I say, realistic tone to it as well. The one thing I want to say about the fight scenes is the really cool thing, and they've never done this in any of the boxing movies, is when you see an opponent for the first time, they pause and they flash his credentials on the screen. I thought that was super, super cool. So they do that really well. Let's get into the fight. The fight is it's held in Liverpool, England. That's where the champion's from. And you see Rocky is, obviously hiding the fact he's fighting cancer and chemotherapy, but he's wearing a toque. And he doesn't look like your typical hardcore Rocky. He's Rocky who's sick, basically. The fight is incredible. And it's filmed very similar to the Rocky Balboa fight, where it's like you're watching live HBO boxing. As a matter of fact, the HBO boxing credentials are on the screen as you're watching it. It's extremely realistic. And a cool thing about this movie is there's a scene where Adonis Creed is knocked out by Pretty Ricky Conlon. That actually happened. He was knocked unconscious, and they kept it in the movie. So when he's knocked down, he's unconscious. That truly happened. So these guys are really hitting each other. Without getting too much in the fight, again, the fight is spectacular. There is a really cool scene in there where Rocky has to make a decision whether to stop the fight or allow it to go on, because Adonis's eye is pretty much closed over. And essentially, he says, I'm going to call the fight. And Adonis says, you can't, I got to prove it. And that's when Rocky looks at him and says, prove what? And he essentially says that it wasn't a mistake. And you see that connection between Rocky and Creed, because the original Rocky was the underdog, and he's proven that he wasn't a mistake, that he wasn't a fluke, that he wasn't a bump in the neighborhood. So you can see a young version of Rocky in this character, and Rocky feels for him. And then Rocky gives him one of the best motivational speeches in like 10 seconds that he can before the last round, and it's cool. And in the last round, the iconic Rocky music comes on. What a scene. Like, just phenomenal. I won't get into whoever wins and loses, but it's an original ending, and it's a realistic ending. A very touching moment towards the end of the movie is we get to revisit the Rocky steps. This time, Rocky's going through chemotherapy. He's not running up the steps. He's slowly walking up, taking breaks, and Adonis is there every step of the way helping him. And a line that Rocky teaches Adonis in the movie is one step, one punch, one round at a time. So as they're going up, one step at a time. What a way to end the movie. This movie could have ended that way, but I was excited, hoping there would be a sequel. It was a fantastic movie. Didn't expect it to be this good. It was fantastic. Easily one of my top 10 movies. As a matter of fact, on a scale of 1 to 10, I give this an 11. Creed is fantastic. And like I mentioned, Stallone won a Best Supporting Actor award at the Golden Globes, and well deserved. His portrayal as a realistic Rocky who's ill was fantastic. Ryan Coogler proved himself to be an awesome director. He would later go on to do the Black Panther. He's currently doing the sequel, the Black Panther. Creed did spawn a sequel, Creed 2. Stephen Capt would take over as director there, and that was fantastic too. I'll get into Creed 2 in another review. And they're currently developing Creed 3, where Michael B. Jordan, interestingly enough, is going to be the director in that movie. And as we know, Sylvester Stallone was the director in the Rocky movie. So it's going to be a huge challenge. Rocky's not coming back for Creed 3, and it's understood why, and I'll explain in Creed 2. He has officially retired the character Rocky Balboa by the end of Creed 2. So Creed 3 will truly be about the continuing journey of Adonis Creed and his love Bianca and their child now, obviously. But just a fantastic movie, Creed. I highly recommend it. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's phenomenal. It's inspiring, and it basically is like carrying on the Rocky feeling, the Rocky saga for a new generation. It's a spin-off. So it's a new character, but he's got the heart and soul of Rocky in him. Fantastic. Highly recommend Creed. I'm very excited about Creed 3 that's currently in the works. And tell me what you think of Creed. Leave some comments, add or like my page. All right, see you later.